loves. Welcome back to Yoga Eat Love. I'm your host, Sabrina Callie, and we've been talking a lot about the yoga of Yoga Eat Love and the love of Yoga Eat Love lately. But now it's time for the eat of Yoga Eat Love. And actually, we're going to be talking about the eat of Yoga Eat Love this whole month. But of course, I want you to remember that none of them are separate, right? They all interact with each other. We can't pull them apart as separate entities because the way you eat is your yoga practice, and your yoga practice is the way you eat, and the way you nourish yourself is an act of love, and the way you practice is an act of love. All of these things, yoga, eat, love, come together. And if you're listening when this episode drops, we're moving into the first week of April, this time of early spring, and something really beautiful is happening right now. I mentioned this on the last episode as well, and I want to dive into it a little bit more because we're in this moment where so many holidays and celebrations are overlapping. You can think back to like Ramadan and Holi and the spring equinox and Carnival, all leading into what is now, at this moment in time, Passover and Easter. And when we zoom out for a second, like take that broader, that wider scope, that wider field of view and perspective, you can start to see something really powerful. There are actually more points of unity than we have with each other and with nature than disunity. We have more in common than what we don't have in common, right? There's different cultures and traditions and different languages and different expressions, but we're all celebrating the same thing, all pointing to the same thing. This time of renewal and rebirth and light returning and life beginning again. And this, my friends, is the essence of yoga itself, and not the modern Western idea of yoga as an exercise or fitness class or workout, and not yoga as a religion either, but yoga as a spiritual tradition of unity. The word yoga literally means yoke or unity, and that yoke or unity, that union point, is this deeper connection with our true selves. It's this alignment with nature, an alignment with the cosmos, alignment with the sun and the moon and the stars and the earth and all of life on this planet. And the remembrance that we're not separate from any of this. We are part of it. We are part of it, and we are the whole. We're the drop of water in the ocean, and yet the ocean itself at the same time. So let's look at the language itself for a minute. So in college, I studied English and languages and linguistics. And so I just love, and something that I love to share, what really lights me up is this etymology, right? This looking at the roots of the words themselves. And when we examine this part of language, the deeper connections, for me at least, become so very clear. And I hope that by sharing this with you, they become really clear for you as well, because we are all the same. We have more points of unity in common than disunity. So looking at the language, let's talk about Easter and Passover. I come from a Judeo-Christian background, so this was one of the things for me in life when I started to study language. It just became so clear. So Passover, Pesach in Hebrew, is the same root as Pasqua in Italian, which is Italian for Easter. So Passover and Pasqua. They all come from the same root of Pesach in Hebrew, which then in Greek is Pascha or Pashka, and then in Latin, Pascha as well. And it literally means, if we're looking at what this root means, it means to pass over. Now, what does that mean? So, like, to pass over a threshold, right? You're moving from one side to the other, to move through something and to come out on the other side. And when you really feel into what that symbolizes, like, what does that mean to you? Moving over a threshold, right? It could be a seasonal threshold, right? We just passed through the spring equinox, moving us into this next stage of the year, this next season of the year where life renews. So it could be passing over from death into life, a time of rebirth and renewal, and literally resurrection in Christianity. And it's not just about one tradition or one story, right? We might have been raised with one tradition or one story, but it's about all of us moving through seasons, moving through challenges, moving through old versions of ourselves and emerging renewed and reborn. And that's exactly where we are right now in this moment, this season. It's this invitation to cross that threshold within yourself, to move from one state of being into another, to let go of what's been and step into what's ready to become, into that renewal and growth and rebirth and liberation, right? That sense of freedom and expansion. And I just did inside Yoga Soul Rising, I just did a practice with my members about this expansion point itself, where we actually activate that expansiveness from within through particular pranayama and kriya breath work, and kriya are evolutionary action. So we're creating change in the body. And all of this is the essence of yoga itself. The purpose of life is to evolve, to change, and to celebrate and liberate while we're here. So right now, we're in that energy of rebirth, right? And quite frankly, whenever you're listening to this episode, we get this opportunity every single day and every month. But I want to bring something to the surface that's really simple, but also profound. So the symbol of this season in many traditions is the egg, the incredible, edible, versatile, and luxurious egg. In America this time of year, we decorate our eggs, we dye them, we have egg hunts with the kids where we go and find these colorful, beautiful eggs, and it's really a fun time. We eat them as chocolates. There's chocolate-covered eggs. In Europe, they're decorated too at Passover and at Greek tables. They're hard-boiled. In Italy, they're literally baked whole into loaves of bread. And all around the world, the egg is an important symbol of the season. It symbolizes this opportunity for rebirth, right? Because the egg itself contains like all the essence of life in its most simple form. And now you might be thinking, like, aren't you a plant-based chef and a vegetarian? And I thought eggs are a no-no. But I want to talk about this for a moment, because whether you're plant-based or vegetarian or vegan or somewhere in between or not at all, the egg is one of the cleanest, most complete, luxurious, and most holistic foods there is. And it is literally the life source. And just like any seeds and many nuts that we eat, they contain the entire blueprint for life. All of that vital, robust energy for life exists within that structure, right? Within the egg, all of life's infinite potential, everything we need for life exists in that shape, in that form. So when we eat that whole, complete, clean, vital food, we're getting that energy, both nutritionally and on an energetic, more subtle level. The egg is incredibly rich and supportive to us, or for us. And I know that this might be not so popular of a perspective in certain spaces, especially if you're in a very strict plant-based or vegan diet, and even in some yoga communities, there's a shy away from eating the egg because the egg comes from an animal, and that's not aligned with ahimsa, which is one of the limbs of yoga, the yamas and the niyamas. Ahimsa is one of the first ones that were taught. Ahimsa meaning not harming or not being harmful. But I want to challenge this a little bit. So chickens naturally produce eggs, right? It's part of their biology. And most of the eggs that we eat are unfertilized. So that means that they were never going to become a chick in the first place. But the chicken still produces eggs every single day, sometimes many, especially when the weather gets warmer. And whether they're fertilized or not, the chicken is producing eggs. So we have to ask ourselves, is this actually harming the chickens if we're eating the eggs? Or have many of us in these circles and in these spheres just been taught to see eggs in this way, that it comes from an animal and we shouldn't eat them? But in many traditional cultures, chickens were simply yard birds, right? In the islands in the south, they're called yard birds first before chickens. And they live alongside of us, right? That's why they're called yard birds, because they live in the yard. They're greatly contributing to the yard, the garden, the farm, contributing to the home, offering nourishment through their eggs without needing to be harmed or killed. And in fact, I worked and volunteered on a sustainable ranch in Costa Rica for some time, a long time ago. And I learned a few things about chickens in my time there. And this is really big. I think it's important because I don't think most of us are aware of this. I certainly wasn't when I first went down there and was volunteering on the ranch. So the chickens were actually the front line of pest control. And this is something that existed in farming as well, way back when, before it got industrialized. But you had a farm, you had a planting. Well, there was on a large scale or a small scale, and you had chickens once they were bigger than like little seedlings, and the chickens wouldn't damage the seedlings, right? The plants have to be big enough. But the chickens were actually used as this form of pest control, because when the chickens go out into the yard, into the farm, into the garden, they actually eat a ton of bugs and little critters that would otherwise completely destroy the gardens or the plantings. And plus, while they're out there in the field eating away all of those super nutritious little bugs, their poop is one of the best fertilizers on the planet. Ask any farmer. So how about that for an energy exchange, right? We're not harming the chickens. They're helping us in so many ways, right? They're helping with pest control. They're fertilizing our yards, and they're giving us these incredibly delicious and nutritious and rich and supportive eggs. Right? And that's a very different relationship than what we hear about today in conversations about whether or not we should eat or not eat eggs, right? And you always have to listen to your body. Some people have aversions to eggs and they could trigger different things. And obviously, I'm not supporting that. If you know that eggs aren't good for you, or you don't like them, disregard this and just think about it symbolically, right? But the egg is probably one of the most incredible holistic foods on the planet. They're high in protein. They have the yolk in the center. And I'm going to go sort of off script right now because I think, and I mentioned this before, but to me, the egg is the most luxurious of the natural foods and holistic foods out there. The yolk itself is like gold. Like, think of it how it feels on your tongue and in your mouth, that richness, right? The texture and the viscosity of it is just fabulous, right? And it's not dairy, right? So for those people who have dairy aversions, I myself am a bit lactose intolerant, so I have trouble digesting dairy. I don't often get that richness in my life. But from eggs, it's just delicious and fabulous. Anyway, like liquid gold, right? Okay, so anyway, I sort of tangented there. I want to get back to a point about whether or not we should or should not eat, for those of you saying like, but what about the male chicks? Right? Don't we kill the male chicks? And yes, that is a valid argument, but and a valid concern. But that's not an argument against eggs themselves. That's an argument about industrialized food systems, right? Those who kill or harm others without a mindful, energetic exchange. You'll find that, local farms and people that produce eggs, produce or raise chickens rather, in a sustainable way. They're not just killing the males haphazardly, right? There's purpose and intention and love that goes into how they're treating the male and the female chicks. So for me, this isn't about blindly consuming. It's about coming back to a more conscious, rooted way of eating. So if you're going to eat eggs, I would suggest not to rely on mass-produced grocery store eggs and go back to your roots and your ancestry as a human living on this planet. So if you can raise chickens, that's fabulous. Or you can, what I try to do is find a local farmer or farmer's market or even a neighbor that does and get your eggs from them, where you know how the chickens are treated, where they live, right? What they're fed matters. Or at the very least, when you're at the store, when you're at the grocery store, choose pasture raised and or organic eggs, primarily pasture raised, so that the chickens are free to roam in the yard, in the grass, on a pasture, where they're eating bugs, right? Where they're eating grasses. So knowing where your food is coming from, feeling into the energy of it, because there's a big difference between disconnection and conscious participation. And when you really zoom out, right, take that broader perspective, this can be a really sustainable, nourishing exchange, and not one rooted in harm, but one rooted in relationship. And that to me feels far more aligned with the true spirit of yoga and a yogic lifestyle than rigid rules ever could. And I really don't subscribe to any kind of rigid rule, rigid food rules, and I don't take stock in dogmatic beliefs either, especially when it comes to nourishment. I believe in paying attention to the energetic exchange of life. I believe in listening to your body and knowing what's right for you, because each and every one of us is different. I believe that food should support your energy, your vitality, your life, not restrict you or be mindless and disconnected. It should support you and increase that vital energy. And in fact, if this is interesting to you, I have a whole wisdom talk inside my kitchen clinic where we dive into more about this energetic exchange. I know I've mentioned that a few times in this episode. If you want to learn more about that, you can jump into the kitchen clinic and learn more at any time. That is available for you to purchase. It's a one-time small purchase, and you have that entire program or course forever. So you can listen to that and get lots of other information. Anyway, going back to the point. Once again, I tangented. I took a tangent. So if eggs feel good in your body, if they support your energy, this is your permission slip to release any guilt or confusion around that, especially if you're trying to eat plant-based or vegan or vegetarian or what have you. I want to give you permission to decide for yourself what nourishes you. And that's part of your practice. That's part of your yoga. And with this season of rebirth, the egg is a symbol of the season, right? So if you love eggs, go ahead and eat them and let them feed your soul and provide that vital energy as we move into the season of spring together. And speaking of spring, this is also a really powerful time to cleanse, to clear the decks, to let go of what's been heavy and stagnant and lingering from winter. I live in the Northeast, and so I often pack on a few pounds in the winter, eating more comforting foods, not moving as much and not being outside as much, and releasing and cleansing and creating space for something new, right? If you've been feeling that pull to shed the ick and the layers like myself and boost your metabolism and energy levels and shed those extra few pounds, perhaps, you can join me in my 3-day self-guided mini cleanse. I'll actually be doing this personally in the coming weeks. I do it seasonally. You can do it along with me or on your own whenever it works for you. I used to offer this mini cleanse as a group challenge. But I've found that it can be hard for everyone to connect schedules and to try to align and do it when works right for everybody, or people really enjoy it. Those who have done it really love it and they want to do it again, but then they have to wait for me to do it again and offer it again. So I've changed the format of it. So it's now a self-guided cleanse that you can buy and do whenever works for you, instead of waiting for me or trying to fit it in your schedule. And you still get all the guidance, all of the shopping lists and recipes, but without the strict timeline. I really like this release of pressure, right? And if this isn't for you, that's fine too. Just take this as your sign to simply simplify and reset and come back to basics. And speaking of food and eating, I've also started something new inside my Eat More Plants kitchen clinic that I mentioned earlier. I'm really excited about this. So in addition to all of the deeper plant wisdom that's in there and kitchen guidance and shopping lists and recipes that are already in there, each month I'm going to be sharing a seasonal recipe from my own personal collection. So super simple, nourishing, and aligned with the energy of the season. Because eating more plants doesn't have to be complicated and stressful. It can actually be really grounding and really fun and really easy. And if you're curious about this energy exchange thing that I mentioned earlier, there's that whole video inside the kitchen clinic that I explain in more depth. And I will, if you're interested, you can join anytime, and I'll drop the links for this in the episode description. All right. So wherever you are right now, just remember, you don't have to overthink this. Come back to the basics. Listen to your body. Breathe deeply and nourish yourself well. This is yoga, eat, love. It's all the same practice. So if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and practice with me, and let's return to your natural rhythm and light you up. One breath, one practice, one day at a time. I love you. Until next time.